just going to teach you how to play against three side, very common lines on lower levels. It's knight c3 here, which is, according to Smerdon, who made a great book about this Scandinavian Portuguese variation, said that this approach is surprisingly common at lower levels by white. And finally, approach that goes after e takes, and when you play knight f6, where they play knight c3. So this is just a very simple approach by white. I just have to say that when I play this gambit with the black pieces, I face knight c3 the most often. So let's get started, and we'll start this lecture with the knight c3 move. I face this move quite often playing blitz online, and people like to play knight c3. They like to capture by knight on e4 and to go with this opening, but ever since I read that Smerdon's book, and ever since I actually checked some more of correspondence games and analysis with a friend of mine who actually used to play the Scandinavian with black, I realized that the d4 is a very simple approach against knight c3. Knight goes back to e2 and you play e5. Center is blocked. White has a good position, and black has a good position, and this looks absolutely fine for black. They definitely have to play d3 or knight g3. Those who play d3, they have all of a sudden problems with the light square bishop, and this problem is not going to be solved very easily for them. So we play knight c6. Very logical approach by black could be c5, but actually when I keep my dark square bishop open as much as I can, I want to play knight c6 holding the center. After g3, which looks like as a very logical solution to solve the problem of the light square bishop, and afterwards break with f4, I like approach, a very aggressive approach with h5 followed by h4 by black. So of all the moves here and of all the possibilities, I believe that absolutely the one that makes most sense is h3. You go with h4, they go g4, and you play knight e7. You know what? If you manage to play knight g6 and bishop d6, and if you simply stop f4 by white, this is going to be a complete disaster for them. So they have to play f4, you capture, play knight g6, and when they take, you take by f pawn. Position is at least better, slightly better for black. You want to play bishop d6, going with bishop g3 check and breaking the castle. You want to play g5 in some positions, taking control of the f4 square and the dark squares as well. You want to play bishop e6, queen e7, and knight e5 and long castle, placing the rook on f8. Black really looks better here. And it's kind of obvious because look at this, look at development of the white pieces, and it's terrible. All these pieces are on the back rank, and furthermore they have like lots of problems with the dark squares. Apart from this d3 possibility, there is also an option with the knight g3. Knight g3 is most common approach by white because they constantly have problems with the light square bishop. And one thing has to be pointed out here. You have to stop bishop c4. If you do that, you did like 70% of good things for this opening. So they definitely and desperately want to put this bishop on c4, and that's why we play bishop e6. All of a sudden our game becomes very good, very powerful, and they have lots of problems. So after bishop e6, most of these guys play knight f3, attacking the pawn on e5. And look at this f6 move. I like these pawns being stretched from g7 to d4. They look very good. I find the light square bishop very problematic for white. They don't have a good way of developing this piece and solving the problem of the light square bishop, and position really looks good. There are a couple of ways of creating this position. People play b3, trying to solve the problem of the light square bishop with the bishop c4 idea. I believe it's suspicious. You play knight c6, bishop c4, take, and of course, what else but d3, taking control. First of all, you open up possibility afterwards for bishop c5, taking a good control of the outpost d4, breaking these pawns, and black just looks better. After, apart from b3, they can also play bishop e5. I faced this move a couple of times. It's not a problem. You play c6, driving this bishop away, and after bishop e4, knight a6, you want to chase away the bishop with knight c5. Also, when they play bishop e3, knight c5, they take, otherwise you would capture by knight on b3 and win the bishop pair. You take by knight on e6. Plan of black's development is very easy. Queen d7, long castle, h5, h4. Most likely want to play g6. You don't want to play g5, because in that case you would probably create a light square hole on f5, unless you cover that by knight e7. But you barely, you actually want to play with knight g on e7, g6, h5, and knight f4, and playing like this. All things considered, black looks easily better here. In a game that was covered in the book I mentioned previously, there was a game with the bishop d3, knight e7, and this guy went with the knight h4. He just went for like control of the light squares. I believe that a short castle makes more sense, but after h5, I definitely think that black solved all his problems, and what has to do something with this pretty aggressive approach and idea by black. Idea is h4, h3, idea is g5, and black really looks great. Any c3, you just play c5. You want to recapture by c-pawn, play knight c6, and get like great space and control of the center. That's one thing. In that game played by Serbian guy, he went for knight h4, queen d7, controlling the f5 square, and this is what I told you previously. So I told you already, don't play g5 in this type of games. You may have some difficulties with the light squares, for example with f5 square afterwards, and watch this out. That could be one of the ideas of bishop d3. This guy played bishop g4, provoking f3. That's a clever way of actually taking f3 square with a pawn and not being able to put the knight back anymore and any longer on f3. So after like bishop c4, knight c6, this should be easily better for black, because you get an upper hand after you make castle, play g6, and play for the rest of the game against these knights on the rim of the board. Apart from that, in the game was queen f1, knight c6, knight f5, g6, knight a7, bishop e7, a3 to stop knight b4, castles, bishop c4, and h5. Just like you see, white has lots of problems to complete his development, and on the other hand, black didn't have a single problem. Black's got an upper hand on the king side, threatens h4. In case on h4 by white, you can play first, and like take a measure of precautions with the king b8. At some point play f5. Position really looks okay. Watch out not to trap your bishop after f3, but position really looks easy for playing with the black pieces. And definitely this GM Pabugabor won. This game was played back to 2012. After like knight e2, e5, they don't have to play only these two moves, d3 and knight g3. So once again, I want to point out probably the most important thing. When they play d3, your knight goes on c6 in order to keep the dark square bishop open. When they play knight g3, you actually they want to solve the problem of the light square bishop, and the key move is bishop e6 that prevents bishop c4 development. They can't play anything else but knight f3, and then you play f6. Those are two important moves, and then you want to play against these knights. Usually you want to chase away the knight on g3 with h5 and h4. And you usually want to play g6, limiting this knight on g3 fully. We just have to check variation where they play e takes d5, knight f6, and knight c3. Even Smerden in his book gave this variation of all these three sidelines against Scandinavian, that it's the most common approach by white previously analyzed two variations, and this 1/3. So they just play knight c3. This is not variation where you can go in Portuguese way with the bishop g4, so you just capture on d5. Playing some blitz and fast games, those opponents who want to equalize, they go with knight d5, queen d5, and queen f3. I know this looks like like our chess from our childhood against kids, when they were just looking to exchange queens and to equalize the games easily. But here you have computer approach bishop e6 that gives you an equal game. And I like c6. I like c6 because after queen d5, c takes d5, d4, knight c6, c3, I just want to go with f6 and e5, playing the center and getting like an absolutely fine game. Apart from that, they can also, instead of knight d5, play line with d4. I found many games played with a4 by white, in which case you take on c3 and create these pretty weak and pawn structure. I put a yellow color on the a2 pawn because it's an IQP pawn, but also these two pawns on c2 and c3, white cannot take any advantage of these pawns, and cannot actually take any advantage of the b file itself. So we play g6, kind of like Grunfeld approach, knight f3, bishop g7, bishop c4, and just like in Grunfeld, you break it with c5. Black looks great, you attack the center, you don't have any problems, and in practice, black scored really well in these positions. Ideally, you want to play bishop g4, knight c6. If they play bishop a3, you can take on d4 or play knight d7. Black looks good. So after knight f6, knight c3, knight e5, literally everyone goes with bishop c4. Don't take on c3. If you take on c3, there is even an interesting line, queen f3, that I like to play myself in blitz with white pieces. But of course, move is knight b6. After you play knight b6, the only move is bishop e3. And here, I gotta point out the next, following move for black. It's knight c6. It's very important to stop d4 by white. It's very important to take control of d4 square. So when they play knight f3, once again I have to point out something. Even I failed in like some bullet games because I simply forget or just make a pre-moves. Don't play bishop g4 because you may lose your game due to this variation. Bishop f7, knight g5, and they haven't only broken your castle, but also will get a pawn back, will get a piece back on g4, and fantastic control of the light squares. So watch out not to play this terrible bishop g4 move. That's why we play bishop f5, because before we complete our development with e6, we just want to play and develop the light square bishop. So when they play d4, we play e6. And here there are two approaches: to play an immediate d5, or to play castle and d5, or to play castle and not to play d5 at all. So castle is much more common, and definitely if they play an immediate castle, bishop e7, if they play d5 immediately, you take, and play castle. any bishop takes c6 is not a problem, because maybe we have a broken pawn structure, and this definitely looks weak, but we got an open position with the bishop pair, which gives us like full like compensation. In case of bishop f4, you can just go with bishop d6, c takes d6, and you've just solved the problem. And I still prefer a little bit more my bishop than knight, because the pawns are on both sides and the game is open, so bishop is better. In case of bishop e7 and rook e1, I've seen this approach by Grandmaster Ivanov, played against Albert, I believe, many years ago. He wanted to go with d5, but after knight a5, you can't go d5 anymore, because if you play d5, and by the way, don't forget about this approach with knight a5 and taking the light square bishop on b3, because many times it's aimed against d5, because you now take on b3. That's actually what happened in the game, and afterwards he won the pawn and won the game. And finally, if they play bishop e3, you just play logical developing move, castle, queen e2, and just like in all previously seen variations, you go with knight a5. What do you want to go for here? You want to take on b3, you want to put your knight on d5 afterwards, and with the bishop pair, and absolutely healthy, or we can even say healthier pawn structure, black is the one who can push for a win here. And finally, if they play bishop f4, that happens like every single game when I play there, and when they don't want to play d5. In case of d5, you just go with e takes, knight takes, bishop, queen takes, and knight b4, equalizing the game. But if they play h3, I'm going to end up this side variations against the Scandinavian defense with the game of Smerdon. He played bishop f6, threatening pawn on d4, knight b5, defending pawn on d4, and threatening c7, rook c8, preparing for a6, c3, solidifying pawn structure, a6, but placing the knight on the edge of the board, bishop e4, pretty nice move to solve the problem of maybe even threatening some bishop f3 and e5, but also bishop d5 with control of the light squares. After knight c4, bishop c4, I like black's approach in the game, who went with knight a5, chasing away this bishop with a tempi, bishop d3, which I don't like so much. Maybe bishop e2 was better, but anyway, c5 can come. In the game was bishop d3, exchanged them, and played c5. Black was certainly slightly better without any problems, and that's why I think that all these side variations, again, the Scandinavian opening, simply don't seem to work.